So welcome to the Whole Man Academy podcast. I'm Anthony Asprey. Our guest today is Jake Alliker. You began working in professional sport in 2010, which was rugby and mixed martial arts. You were on our radar because in 2015 you worked as Max Verstappen's performance coach in Formula One, which we'll talk a lot about. You work in strength and conditioning, and also the important point is mentoring. You spoke at our latest Whole Man Academy event, which was great. You stepped away from Formula One at the start of 2020 to develop your own coaching company, which specializes in personal development for individuals and motorsport packages for teams and young drivers. Jake, welcome to the Whole Man Academy podcast.
Anthony, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here.
Excellent. Well, that's a good start. Here we go with the questions we always begin with. How are you and where are you?
I am very well. I'm fit and healthy, thankfully, which I'm very grateful for. And I am located in Cambridge at my girlfriend's, at my partner's parents' house, actually. So, very, very fortunate. We've got a house where we can sort of siphon ourselves off and get out of each other's hair when we need to, and people can crack on with their working days. So, out of London about a month ago, and moved up here and riding this crazy sort of time out, I suppose.
It is crazy, and I totally agree. I think a lot of us struggle to sum up what it's like. Just quickly, we've met before, and I know you're how tall?
I'll round up 6'4", shall I? That sounds
6'4". Yeah, I round up to 6, even though I'm nowhere near it. But what's it been like for you? Because I know you're into obviously your fitness and training and doing all this stuff outdoors. So how's it been for you? Kind of feeling like you're not being able to get out anywhere at all.
Yeah, it's been okay. When we thought, okay, we'll get out of London for a little bit, and fortunate enough got a good sized garden, which is an incredible privilege in this time. And I sort of, from being in my previous role in Formula One, carrying one of my bags, kit bags I take around with me, was like a little mobile gym, and any city I'd be in as well, I'd go into a sports shop and just buy an unnecessary little bit of gym kit that I probably didn't need, but I just start accumulating. Oh, I need this band because it's a different color and a different strength. I need this type of thing you can do this ab exercise with, and I need this stick, and I need this. So by the end of it, I've amassed all this kind of equipment, and now it's actually proving to be quite beneficial that I've had it, and I have brought it with me. And so you're able to go, right, okay, I can keep fit. I can, obviously every personal trainer under the sun now is doing home workout videos, so no one's short of ideas. And then occasionally you're thinking, oh yeah, there's no time limit on when you can exercise. And then other days and other parts of the days where actually, do you know what, I can't be arsed, and I'm just and actually to sit and be all right with that is also proving all right. So from a physical and sort of training point of view, there's lots of ideas out there, and Joe Wicks is getting the nation moving with his PE classes, which is great, and for all sorts of various people. For more serious athletes, I know my friends and colleagues at Harlequins Rugby and at various rugby clubs. I think depending on how long it continues for in this situation, you've got serious elite athletes having to train with minimal equipment and sort of minimal facilities, which after a while will become a concern. But for now, I think people aren't short of help and support where they need it.
That's a good point, because actually we'll get onto that. But I guess as if guys are, not just guys, but those guys that are professional sportsmen, that it's not just nice to be fit, but it is essential to be in the elite category of fitness. I'm guessing for a lot of those, it must be challenging at the moment, because if you haven't got your home gym, you're limited to, as you say, using small bits of kit.
Yeah. There'll definitely be a point where I think, and was it Jose Mourinho the other day? He got in a bit of trouble, didn't he? Because he was trying to sneak a session in the park with some of his Spurs players or something like that, where they'll need a greater stimulus at some point, other than resistance bands and sort of body weight circuits, which have definitely got their place, even in elite, even for elite sportsmen and women. But there'll definitely be a point where the returns that you get on that, and the diminishing returns will certainly start to kick in with it. And then, but we'll see how long.
Okay, well, I think the other important thing for the people listening is it's good to hear you say that sometimes it's all right that you just can't be asked.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it's and obviously I find myself, and I've probably got, everyone's gone through the same conversations. Some people have then been sick of the same mantras. Myself now as a performance coach, still grounded in physical performance, but like I say, mentoring, and whether that's performance of your work life, social life, relationships. Right, okay, it's just, what can I add? What can I do? What opportunities? What a great opportunity! Crisis is a terrible thing to waste. All these kind of sort of cookie cutter phrases that are getting hurled at us on a day-to-day basis of what a great opportunity to make use of. But then also occasionally just being able to sit and have a day where you're a bit bored and a bit idle, and you're not really sort of concerned with being super productive and making a vision. That's also perfectly fine and very, very normal. And I don't think we should be in such a rush to be agitated with that. Now, that has to come from a grounding of, how can I not get agitated? Because after a certain while, people twiddling their thumbs, and the word anxiety and anxiousness is getting used a lot, understandably. But yeah, so the days when you sort of can't be bothered, with the afternoons and mornings when you're going to lie in bed a little bit longer, that's perfectly normal. And I think therein lies an opportunity to see what actually crops up for you a little bit in your self-talk, in your feelings, in your thinking. Those are the kind of opportunities to learn a little bit more, rather than going, right, I'm going to go read this, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to do that. And I say, as I've got my guitar next to me, sort of like half blowing the dust off it, because I've said, I'm going to pick my guitar up again and learn guitar, which is making very slow progress. But
I was going to say, how much of that have you actually done?
A little bit, but I think probably my missus and other people in the household they're expecting me to suddenly just play a tune very soon. But I think sort of as a beginner, learning the guitar is not the most melodic thing to be listening to when people are sort of trying to relax. So the days, it's just that as well. There's an opportunity to sit with doing nothing and seeing what kind of crops up from a physical point of view, from your physical health, but also mentally, as a very big opportunity there.
Well, firstly, we'll make sure we tag everybody when you do your first Instagram live on your guitar.
Yeah.
But let's jump into probably what a lot of the people listening would be really interested to get into, the crazy world of Formula One.
Yeah.
And for yourself, when you were working with Max Verstappen, being his, was your title performance coach?
That was the title. Yeah, the title was performance coach, and you could throw you could open a very large umbrella under what that entailed, from physical performance, physical preparation, mentoring, big brother role, soundboard, and then sort of developmental coach, and it's all driver unique, client unique, whoever your driver was. Max now is a near enough a household name, certainly in Formula One, he presented a great opportunity for me as a coach, and really accelerated my learning as a coach to help create the. I would try to summarize and get out really, like you say, what was the title of the role and what it was. It was sort of helping cultivate really the best environment for Max to go and be Max behind the wheel of a Formula One car. He certainly didn't need any direction once he sat down in the cockpit or sort of, guidance. And there's. The interesting thing with Formula One is it's such a big circus, so many inputs, from inputs into Max, but into the whole team as well. So the challenge had to be sort of when would I come in, and then when would I take my opportunities to have conversations. So performance coach was the title. Like I say, first and foremost, grounded in his physical performance. Max has to get through a Formula One season fit and healthy. He has to be able to compete in every race. He has to get through the race well and efficiently, so that he's still sharp and able to make decisions under intense pressure in pretty extreme environments. I would sort of class Formula One really as almost as an extreme sport. Certainly a high speed, high octane extreme sport. And so making the environment over a 12-month, 11-month season, making that as optimal as possible, as consistently as possible, was primary role.
Well, I guess the interesting thing that people probably be surprised about is, I know you'd said that you didn't actually know anything about motorsport or specifically Formula One before you took the role. So can you tell us a bit about that and how it was that you became to be his performance coach?
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. I wasn't really a Formula One fan. I was a big sports fan. I think I'd watch the first few laps of a race occasionally if I walked into the living room and it happened to be on, and I'd watch the last few laps of a race and heard of Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button and all the old famous names, but that was probably about it. And it was 2014. I was working for Jersey Rugby Club at the time in the Championship and living in the Channel Islands, which was great and a good experience in itself, moving from London. And I just chucked my hat in the ring on an old Facebook group, university Facebook group. This role came up, performance coach for junior Red Bull drivers, and I was like, that sounds cool. And as a sort of, I was at the time I was in rugby and I was a strength and conditioning coach. So, and I was very clear at the time. I was like, right, I'm just going to go all the way to the top in strength and conditioning for rugby. I'm going to work for England Rugby, and it's going to be great. And I'm just going to do that and get to the top of that. But I'd always wanted to sort of diverse, and a lot of coaches, even in rugby, and guys who were head of performance, and this ties onto a little bit of the sort of personal development side and of myself. I sort of thought, well, that sounds bloody great. If the head of performance somewhere, the head of performance for England Rugby, the head of performance there, it's got that kudos, and will be seen to be really great. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to go do something a little bit out of left field. And throwing my hat into the ring for this initial job, junior performance coach for junior Red Bull drivers, was that opportunity. And I got sort of flatline rejected from that, from he's now a very good friend. And
what's the reason why?
The reason why I sent my CV, and that was exactly the question. That was probably the moment that really made the difference of if I got the role or not, because I got this sort of fairly typical rejection email through, and I very nearly just kind of settled on that and thought, yeah, okay, fine. I love where I am. I love my job. I love rugby. It's okay, no, not a problem. But then I just simply asked the question why, and just kind of nagged a little bit because I wanted a bit more detail, or even I sort of thought, well, this is the right thing to do. You've got to ask why, haven't you? And the answer I got back was, at the time, my role and my sort of expression on paper was very strength and conditioning based, so sort of very sports science-y, and just that. And the role, as I later came to learn, but also the guy who was sending me this email, is now a good friend, kind of said, it's not really that type of world. Yes, there is a bit of strength conditioning and a sort of essential sports science, but then beyond that, the role doesn't require that. It doesn't require this very sort of heavily objective sports science focus. And at the time, I was like, okay, well, I think actually I sort of thought, well, I think my strengths do lie in the personal side of it, more so than sports science. And I think if anyone's seen my Excel skills or sort of data analytics skills, they could vouch for that. Yeah, they probably could. And so I nagged him again, and I said, well, look, he said, if this role is something you'd be interested in, I'll keep you posted if anything comes up. Now, in that meantime, was about 10, 12 months, we kept in contact, the odd coffee in London, and eventually said, look, I can see actually you have a bit more of an understanding of that personal side of coaching and of performance. So I'll keep you posted if anything comes up. And like I say, 10, 12 months went by, and this was coming to the end of 2014. And then I got a call from Stu at the time. His name Stuart Smith, good friend, and he's also a really good performance coach, and was a bit of a sort of mentor to me as I got into that world of Formula One. He called me up and said, right, Red Bull have just signed this kid, Max Verstappen, as the youngest Formula One driver in history. And I was like, right. He said, have you heard of him? And I said, no. And they said, oh, his dad used to be a Formula One driver as well. Maybe you've heard of him, Jos Verstappen. I said, no, sorry. And they said, well, okay. And so straight away you're thinking, well, Red Bull Racing, youngest Formula One driver in history, that's a pretty big tagline as it is. So I said, well, there's got to be maybe something a little bit about this kid. So I said, yeah, okay, I'm interested. And then it went from there, really. The sort of first part was, the very first part was to go out and meet Max and his family, his manager. And that was, if I said that was the sort of final part of the interview, it was really just to see, right, can you establish some chemistry and essential rapport in a very, very short time with a kid? And I mean, he just turned 17 at the time. You know, different nationality, completely different background, sporting background. You know, I was 29, I want to say. Yeah, 29 at the time. And, 29, 28. And and just came, and it's like, right, is there chemistry here, rapport? And you've got to kind of think, could you be friends with this lad? Different roles before in rugby. And when I started working in rugby, there's always that coach player line, which you try and establish and keep, doesn't get blurred. Certainly the intention is for it not to be blurred too often. That may have changed now, I think, as well, in some sports, actually. This sort of, keep it quite sort of disciplined, and one day you're going to have to give them a bollocking. So, you know, you're a bit there. When I moved to Jersey, I moved there, I didn't know anyone, and I was a very young sort of strength and conditioning coach at the time, my first role on my own. And all the other players were my age, also just moved to the island, and sort of we'd finish a week's training and they'd be like, right, Jake, we're going to the beach, have a barbecue now. And it's like, well, was I realistically going to take myself off and sit at home on my own and go for a windy walk on a cliff top on my own? Probably not. So I sort of, you know, I was sort of practiced and a bit versed in performance relationships where you can be a friend, and if you get the relationship right, and if you get the honesty right, that they behave, they react and respect and respond to you when you're actually then got your professional hat on. You are having to be firmer, more direct, more honest, and holding to more account. So I felt confident going into it. And after that day and a half with Max, end of 2014, I was flying back to Jersey at the time, and I got a phone call from him a bit later that evening, or a text, I think it was, just saying, yeah, Jake, I've sort of just let you know, I've decided I'd like to sort of press on with you, and I'd like to go with you and take this forward with you. So that was that. And then, so end of 2014, left Jersey, we had our last game before the Christmas break. Leeds at home it was, and I did a little speech to the team in the dressing room at the end of the game, saying I was leaving, and I couldn't believe I lost it, and I started blubbering. I started blubbering to all these rugby lads, saying, right, I'm off, boys, and thanks for all the time. And so that was good, but that's, I think, indicative of the sort of the relationships and the rapport I had with a group of mates and players that you built up with. And I started in 2015 and jumped on the circus. And
how would that, when you first started, I mean, what kind of form would that take your work? Were you primarily at a distance, or did you have to be with him all the time? Because there's a lot of travelling involved.
There's a hell of a lot of travelling. And in my first year, not really kind of knowing the lay of the land, Max also being, you know, incredibly young, he's still a young guy now, but, you know, really young then, I thought, right, I've got to, because the company that I was subcontracted for at the time, Hinsa Performance, they're a Finnish sort of well-being company, corporate well-being company, and they use sort of Formula One a lot as their shop window and testing ground, their coaching practice and things like that. The impression I was able was like, right, you've got to move to, you have to move to the Netherlands. You've got to live with your driver. And I was like, okay, sort of at the time I was in Jersey on my own. So I was thought, yeah, like great, I'll move wherever. It turns out it wasn't the Netherlands, which, you know, doesn't necessarily mean I thought Amsterdam straight away. It was Belgium. It was in a little town called Mosaic, which is on the Dutch-Belgian border, which I don't know, sort of, yeah, for any people who are from that area, it's pretty quiet, and it's pretty rural. So I'd sort of dropped myself in there and renting an apartment just around the corner from Max's father's house, where he was living at the time. Hadn't made the big move to Monaco yet, as these drivers tend to do. So and that was my thinking, was I've got to be with this. If there's an event, if the race team have an event, I've got to go with him to it. I'm going to go, you know, round his house lots. I'm going to sort of show him, and educate him in the kitchen, and he's going to sort of buy into it. And it changed dramatically, because I thought, beforehand, working in rugby, you're looking after your programming, and you're managing the health and fitness and performance of sort of 36 rugby players.
Yeah.
So, and the workload, and any strength and conditioning coach who's gone through sort of championship sport or not quite top level sport will tell you the workload actually is massive. And, you know, performance teams or strength and conditioning teams, physio teams, are maybe 1 or 2 man sort of bands. So you're crossing over and taking on a vast amount of work, and it's sort of long hours. And then you go and look after just one guy, and that's where then the start really, and my first year I probably didn't quite realise, or my eyes weren't quite open to it, but it was the start of probably my development most as a coach, because of the environment I'd chosen to put myself in, and the individual that I was sort of working with. It was, yeah, one guy. So people think, oh, and this is great. And I think it was maybe one of my answers to your questions, was I thought, right, this feels a bit different, because I was working in championship rugby, and I moved to this job. I had a pay increase, so I thought, okay, great. You know, no one would always turn their nose up at that. But At first, I struggled with it. The first 6 months, the sort of having this perceived kind of initial lots of free time, and I was getting paid a bit more. So from a very superficial point of view, I thought, hang on, like, why do I not feel quite yet into this? And I am missing something. I'm missing the opportunity that I'm not taking yet. I'm getting paid more. I've got more free time. That's the dream, isn't it? And as I sort of, the realization I learned it wasn't. So yeah, that was the big change for me.
Did you? I guess also going from working with a big group of guys playing sport, and I'm experiencing a part of that myself. So there's a lot of banter around, and it's always very lively.
Yeah.
So then going to somewhere very quiet and working with just one person.
Yeah.
How did you find that? And how do you navigate the change from being, I guess, uber busy to having more of that downtime?
Yeah. Like I say, I found it difficult initially, and that was my own part of that was my own doing, because I'd changed and stepped into this role and this different sport, and kind of not naively, I was comparing it all to rugby. I was comparing it to a sport I'd not only played all my life, not to a serious level, but played all my life, been involved with all that life, the individuals, the families involved, the way you build your weekend around sport on the telly, rugby on the telly in the weekend. So yeah, so I was always looking over my shoulder, comparing it to rugby, sort of trying to get used to racing drivers and get used to their mentality, get used to the language and the kind of feel and the culture in this sense, by just the behaviours and the sort of the feel of it all. When Max first started, he was with Toro Rosso, which is kind of Red Bull's second team, if you like, or sort of junior team, an Italian-based team. And not that sort of being around, I was born in Italy, my mother's Spanish, my mother's English, so that wasn't a thing. But just in terms of being in an alien environment in a sporting context, and sort of going, right, well, how do I become effective here and validate here? And then in a team where, you know, it's kind of broken English and broken language, and being sort of far away from home. So that was a lot to sort of adapt to at first, but and once I sort of released that and going, look, this isn't, am I okay with this? This isn't a kind of rugby, just like train all the time, and from a very gym-based environment. There's not many people that love going to the gym. It's probably rugby players and crossfitters and sort of bodybuilders who love going to the gym. You have to kind of, most of the people can't stand the places, which I totally understand. But at the time, I had sort of grown up with that. It took a bit of getting used to. So you had to. So that's where the start of the role, whilst I was there to say, I wouldn't say I was sort of directly mentoring Max. Max certainly wouldn't say like, Jake's my mentor. He would say, yeah, he's my trainer. Yeah. I was really, the mentoring started with Max, with me, largely. And that's really where I got to after probably the first 12, 18 months. I took a little look into starting to understand myself a bit better. I got an external coach to coach me, to realize how I could be more effective in the conversations I was having and the way we spoke, because that's the significant part of the role. You asked me earlier, Anthony, sort of what was the title of the role. The title of the role is performance coach, and it's great when I've the role itself as well. You mentioned Formula One, Rebel Racing. People want to hear about it, and it's a real privilege when people are excited to hear about the world of Formula One. And then guys who've kind of been in either coaching or personal training or strength and conditioning, they're like, well, what do you do with a driver, and how does that work, and what does that role look like from a performance point of view? And I suppose if I'd have just said, well, my role is to try and have better conversations, not just with Max, but the people really closely involved in, that is the majority of the role. Right. Now, that doesn't sound particularly sexy or blockbuster. Like, as a performance coach, what you do, I really try and have better conversations with someone. That's it. Physical training, traveling around the world, the competition, they give you the inlets, they give you the opportunities. Even I'm sure, like yourself, you got a lot of questions prior to this podcast of Formula One. Probably a lot of them maybe from the Netherlands. I don't know if you sort of spotted, but that's and even for me now as a new kind of business owner, I'm fully aware that my great opportunity has been the individual I've worked with, the team I've worked with. It's been great, and I've used it, say, working with this and it's that, but it's the science and art a little bit of trying to structure and choreograph better conversations over the course of a season, and that's always what I was trying to do. Sometimes with better success than others with Max and with the rest of the team, engineers, managers, team principals. Was always sometimes a sort of ebb and flow, but really it all started from opportunities that the competitive environment of Formula One gave to have better opportunities, whether it was an incident on track that happened between Max and Daniel. I think Baku, 2018, when they crashed into each other, took each other out of the race. Big drama. It's always kind of, and sport does that. When something happens, it's kind of this cataclysmic event, and then conversely, when something really good happens, there's the opportunities and pitfalls within that. But I suppose now more than ever, things are getting put into perspective a little bit of what it really means to sort of when the shit hits the fan, I suppose.
Well, on that, we've got a couple of questions, certainly, that because we put it on our Instagram, and then I'll invite people to ask questions. But actually, one of them was, it was actually about race day. So what is your role, or what was your role on race day with Max or any other Formula One driver if you were working with them?
Yeah. So come the Sunday, the actual race day, Formula One is it's a 4-day sort of starting competition. Thursday is the media day, and then Friday and Saturday are predominantly practice days, with Saturday afternoon being qualifying, which in itself was almost a separate competition and mindset around the competition, which was great. So those are your opportunities to get prepped. But come Sunday, I would almost take on, at the track, I was, sort of backroom support staff. So you're logistically, practically making sure everything's kind of set up for Max to move very smoothly through the day, from when he gets out the car to his media, when he comes back from his media to the hospitality. He knows what he's doing with his kit. He knows what time his meal is. I've spoken with the chefs at the start of the week, and we've planned out his menu. In the Red Bull hospitality, you get looked after pretty well in terms of a buffet for lunch, dinner. You can eat pretty well from a healthy point of view. You can also eat pretty indulgently. I mean, they homemade ice cream every race, sort of Nutella ice cream and things like that, and it's just in sort of his fats around there. So, and Max would be the first one to say he finds it a challenge standing in front of a buffet, not to go crazy as I would. So that was a big part of it, you know, structuring his meal times and how he felt with his meal times. And then come race day, I mean, the actual pattern of race day was, if it was a late race, evening race, sort of think Singapore, very, very different, but an evening race in Bahrain or Abu Dhabi, might do something in the morning, maybe a little loosen off in the gym. This was something that changed and evolved as I went on, as Max and R's relationship sort of developed, and Max started to take a bit more ownership of the process himself. So, for example, that on the morning of a race or a morning practice, I'd be like, right, mate, let's get in the gym. We'll do a real specific loosen off, and we'll get your neck like fired up, and we'll do all the switching off. And I had to start weighing up between how much sometimes he wouldn't be up for that, versus my thing of going, well, I want to be seen to be doing the right thing and looking like we're doing the right thing. Well, actually, the right thing is probably that he has an extra half hour in bed, and he gets up and he's just proper happy he had in bed and got some room service to the room. Now, is that a performance metric? No, but that's the name of the game. That's the name of the game of Max arriving, feeling completely at ease, completely at calm, and knowing exactly what he has to do at the racetrack. So if he says, "Nah, Jake, I'll meet you at the car and we'll go straight to the track," I'm fine. And then once you get to the track, kit, make sure his driver room's all set up, and then it's just Sunday's probably the day where I'm least sort of walking around doing bits and pieces. If I'm rushing around on a Sunday and sort of looking like I'm really busy, something wrong has occurred, really.
Right. So you need to have taken care of everything beforehand, basically. Yeah.
And then it's just ensuring, I say damage limitation, not damage limitation. In the certain races were really busy, and hospitality would be really busy. So there's a very short walk from Max's driver's room, and in European races that was in a nice big hospitality, and it was a lovely room and everything. In flyaway races, the further overseas races, that might be a small sort of compartmentalized room in the garage next to the tires, and there's cars like the wheel guns going all the time, and it's bloody noisy, and you sort of think you're trying to create a nice like zen environment for him to just be chilled and go whatever. So sometimes that would fly in the face of it, but generally it was a short walk to the paddock, and then, you know, he'd get ambushed from either press crews or fans in that sort of short walk. And then, you know, I was never really going to be that training performance coach who would dart in front of a 12-year-old boy who wants Max Verstappen's arse and go, no, like
a bodyguard.
Yeah, like you can't disturb him now, or, you know, get that camera out of face, because actually he should be, you know, and Max would say, and sorry, I'll try and stick to the point where we're going towards race day, but
all right,
I'll show you how that reflects in other instances. But so yeah, and then so it's getting to the garage. He's at the garage. He's set up. His helmets and gloves are there, and it's just this. No other sport do you have such an intrusion on the performer's kind of space, personal sort of space, and right up until the sort of the blow of the whistle, if you like to use a field sport analogy, than in Formula One. And we do a warm up. We do a physical warm up in the driver room, a bit of prep at say 1 o'clock, and then. But the lights wouldn't go out on the race car until 10 past 2 or 10 past 3. So nearly 45 minutes to 50 minutes would pass until he's actually going to, physically exert himself and compete. So the effect of any warm up you do from a physiological point of view was pretty negligible. But what it did establish from a cognitive and mental point of view was rhythm, conserving, cognitive space, and just starting to get into a mental space where he knows what's coming, and he can save that for when he's going to be really in a stressful environment in 2 hours time with 5-6 laps to go.
Is that also because you're just, for each race you want to have a structure and a routine that you follow, just so that your preparation before every race is absolutely on point?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where Max and I, as our relationship developed, and the pleasing thing was, I think overall any S&C coach, performance coach was, or in my opinion, should ultimately get to a point where they are making themselves redundant. Like, that's kind of what we want to eventually, just to sort of, for your driver to sort of graduate, or for him to really just own his process. And Max and I would have some great conversations about it. And Max, he's, and I think all athletes are actually very, very intelligent individuals. They sometimes, I think, because they're sports, whether they're footballers, rugby players, tennis, motorsports drivers, being so single-minded, they sometimes get thought. But you have some great discussions with him. And Max said, look, I agree. Like, yes, most of the time we want this preparation to be like this. And we sort of had a thing. I was quite sort of particular about, look, 30 minutes, 20 minutes before we get in the car, there's no distraction. There's no sort of input. You've not got family coming and going, or this sort of thing. But the way those conversations went, I said, look, help me understand what's going to get you there as well. And I think he'd say, well, if one race weekend that doesn't happen, or I don't get this, it's got to be okay. I don't have to think like, oh God, I was late to do my lie down exercise, or I was late to do that sort of preparation, or we went a different way, or we forgot to do it. Doesn't throw anything off.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a great strength of his. And so me then going, okay, I've understood that, kind of, if I'm to, seek first to understand, really, then just kind of try and get my point across. We can help make that the case. And I'll spot when there's opportunities, and I'd say, look, do you want to do this? Or look, we forgot to do this, but you're right. You feel it doesn't matter. And he's like, absolutely not. Whereas if it's like, oh shit, we haven't done that, then everything starts to unravel.
I guess that's just gonna add to his kind of the load on his mind at the time.
Now in business and in sports, certainly they want players to sort of adapt in the moment, and just be in the moment, and be fluid in their thinking, and responsive, and sort of just be able to handle what comes of them. And so in practice sessions, and that's why it was great, like come Sunday, yes, we'd normally have things nailed down and we'd stick to them. But on the Thursday or the Friday, sometimes we take a relaxed approach. And from an outside point of view, that could be seen as maybe a bit lackadaisical, or just a little bit like, oh, you've been quite sort of chilled there or whatever. But they're the opportunities where we're practicing just not being okay with being sort of here and now, and not having to be so regimented and boxed in by your thinking, your approach, because come the lights out, then anything could happen, and often he'd respond well to it.
Well, I guess you've brought me nicely onto the point, which I think for any of the people listening, the average sports person that we know, it's important for preparation. It's important to be trained well and have the right mindset, but they're not in danger of dying whilst they're performing. And how, I mean, that goes to any time they're in the car, I guess, whether it's it's the actual race day, or qualifying, or pre-qualifying, warm up, etc. So how would you work with a guy on them being okay about, and they all know that obviously there's that huge risk every time they get in the car?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think. Yeah, and that's the sense. It's an extreme sport. It's up there with big wave surfing. The reality is they could kill. I think and any event where you've involved high speed, Mother Nature, or an animal, I think they're probably sort of up there with the three sports that are pretty bloody dangerous. And it was Spa last year in an F2 race. A young guy lost his life in a, I think it was one of the races of the weekend on the Saturday. going up Eau Rouge, real famous corner at the Spa circuit, Spa-Francorchamps circuit. And right away, it was live on TV. It was covered in the Netflix documentary Drive to Survive, this season 2. And horrific event. And straight away, everyone in the paddock knew something bad had happened. And as it turned out, sadly, tragically, this lad, Antoine Hubert, he lost his life. And the feeling in the paddock was unbelievable. This just weight came through the paddock. Max's teammate at the time was really good friends with this lad, and he was pretty distraught. Everyone was just this feeling, and that's the first time you could see it definitely affects everyone, drivers, Max, all the sort of names that people think of. You could see it affected them.
Yeah.
And lots of talk about whether the race should have gone ahead the next day, and there's a little bit of this sort of cavalier spirit, a little bit of like, oh, he's a racer, and this is what he would have wanted for us to go racing. And I sort of understand that, but then I definitely understand as well that should we've been racing the next day. But drivers are very good at compartmentalizing. There's what's his name actually? I heard a talk. I was at an event. I think a year or so ago, leaders in performance, guy called Kevin Dutton. Have you heard of him? Kevin Dutton does work on psychopaths. I think he's from Cambridge Uni, and his sort of big interest of area study is sort of high performance and psychopathic tendencies. And he did a presentation, starts off with all these questions. What would your answer to this be? And the audience are sort of laughing because there's some questions that are a bit out there. Probably more people wanted to admit to sort of certain answers than others. And if you're kind of on the spectrum, he says everyone is on the spectrum of having psychopathic tendencies. And I would definitely say racing drivers and elite performance sort of generally could be classed there, have that kind of coldness, that need not to get vexed. And because for them, it is a matter of potentially life and death if they do. That's why I sort of put them. There's a similar effect when I worked with combat sport athletes, and when I was working with combat sport athletes, I was having to take part in some of these classes: kickboxing, wrestling, MMA. It was ridiculous, and I very quickly realised that combat sport athletes are a type of person. They don't mind hitting people in the face, which is quite a thing actually to overcome. They also don't mind getting hit in the face. It's like a little brush on it doesn't flux. Racing drivers, high speed athletes, they don't think it excites them and it opens up a level of potential for them. If we're in the passenger seat of a car that's going over 200 miles an hour, it's like the most terrifying thing in the world, and you're saying no, completely stop this. So that coldness and that ability to compartmentalize, like I say, is what keeps them safe.
Is that them being in the flow, for want of a better description? Because I guess when they're traveling at that speed, they're not thinking about, I think I'll brake here, I'll put my foot on here, I'll do this. It's kind of just a natural reaction.
It's definitely they're definitely in the sort of autonomic programs and subconscious program there. That blood is not going to an area of the brain where they can access conscious thought. Definitely not. Maybe on certain tracks it differs because there's such variation in racetracks. There's some racetracks where the straight might be over 1 kilometre long, and actually a little bit of self-talk might come in. They start thinking too further ahead about the end result. Start thinking about either the mistake or the incident just happened. But it's largely some of the tracks they're not accessing. They're just relying on years and years and years and years and years of repetition. And many of these guys and girls are early specialization cases in terms of sport performance. It's a sport that requires huge level of practice and huge. Max started go-karting when he was 4 years old, this sort of age, and from that point it's just layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of his consciousness of what it feels like to go fast, what it feels like to crash, what it feels like then to get in the car the next day. So that's just built upon that, and it just builds upon that experience. So for them they'll all say similar things, like they can't think about it. They can't think about the danger of them being being in danger when they get in the car, because if they do, then they make a mistake. And I think a lot of sportsmen that I've worked with, certainly in rugby, you think about it, coming back from a long-term injury, the minute you go in to a tackle or into a situation a little bit less than 100%, you will come out of it. That's when you're going to get more likely to get hurt. And does that tap into kind of flow states and these high levels of performance of non-thinking, time, sort of standing still? I think racing does lend itself to that level of performance. Feel is a word that gets used a lot in racing. The driver's seat that actually gets put in the car sometimes has this sort of fiberglass seat, millimeters of sort of fiberglass, to then where it's on the actual floor of the car. Some seats even have little holes cut out on the arse bones of a driver, and some drivers don't have them filled in, so they are literally, their arse is literally on the floor of the which you don't see on TV as much, but there's massive fiberglass floors that take up the length and width of the car, so they can feel what it's like getting into the corner, so they can feel what it's like accelerating out of the corner. And that is and drivers, one of their big challenges is the way they communicate that and verbalise that feel to, say, a room full of engineers who are looking at data, who are looking at sums and theoretical ideas about what should be happening and what the driver should be feeling. And then again, so this is where then a coaching opportunity is, in terms of language, in terms of communication, how effective both the engineers are and both the driver is of relaying that feel, and then the engineers to sort of, with their objectivity and data and all that sort of stuff, understand and relate to that. So that's where something comes. But certainly the sport would lend itself, long races, flow, when a car's out in front, if he's in no man's land, generally the whole classic thing of, well, what are you thinking about, when they're not thinking, they are just in a higher state of performance and going with the flow, if you like. Absolutely.
Well, that brings me on to one of the next questions, which was actually more personal to you, but the question was, have you been in a car with Jake or another Formula One driver? And if so, what was it like?
I have, so I've not been in people are going, have you sat in a car before? Or is
Not too big.
I've not sat in there. No. I've not sat in the cockpit. I have. I've never got the rounds. I haven't got a bee in my bonnet about it. But he never took me round a track in some of the races. They did it was called hot laps, I think, for the sort of VIP guests and things like that. They'd come and it was either an Aston Martin or a Mercedes, Super Mercedes. And Max and some of the drivers would take them round for a razz. But I have been in a road car, plenty of times with Max Verstappen. If I say we were in Germany on the Autobahn, then I suppose it's all right from a legal perspective. And there was probably one or two times where I said to him, right, thanks for that, but don't do that with me in a car again.
Because is that where you can do any speed you want?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And if you're with a Formula One driver, you're asking for trouble. Yeah,
exactly, and he's got some all right motors in his collection now. He has done before, but obviously probably fairly safe with a guy who's pretty handy behind the wheel.
Yeah, so it could be worse, I guess. Well, I've picked just three of the questions from the ones that got sent. Was the other one was, what's the craziest thing you've seen at a Formula One track?
That's a good question. Craziest. I was always, what's craziest things? Well, lots of crazy things here. Sort of ridiculous things. The sort of fanfare around is kind of is bonkers. And the Texas Grand Prix was always growing and growing and growing each year. And with these new American owners, they try and make it more razzmatazz. So everything from, I think probably I think it was 2017 Texas. The entrance for the drivers, normally they do a sort of drivers parade just before they sort of getting ready to go in there, and the drivers go out there and go on a bus, go around the track. But this year in Texas, they roped in the announcer from Las Vegas MGM Grand, boxing announcer, going, this is
Is the let's get ready to rumble guy.
Let's get ready to rumble. So we had the let's get ready to rumble guy with these 20 Formula One racing drivers, but it wasn't just he was on this stage. They had the stars and stripes laid out. You had the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, sort of making a tunnel for each of these drivers. Meanwhile I'm water boy at that point, so I'm holding Max's water bottle and helmet and kind of waiting backstage, just kind of making sure Dallas cheerleaders are all right, they're fine, and then everyone's kind of
it's very good of you.
Yeah, I just and then walking out, and then but it was just this bonkers sort of thing, and I don't know if it worked or not. I mean, it seemed quite good fun. Racing drivers, there's you got Lewis Hamilton rocking down the paddock with his chains, and Max will be the first to say that as well. That he kind of he just wants to get in the car and drive, and that is absolutely Max. None of this kind of fanfare. So you've got this big announcement, American crowd going crazy. And then one or two drivers, Daniel Ricciardo's one who be quite a sort of extrovert and like to sort of lap up and have a bit of a laugh with it. But you got a lot of these other drivers who didn't quite know what to do or handle it. And this boxing announcement coming in, you just cheerleads either side and just come out, give them a little wave. So that was pretty crackers and just bizarre. And then in Texas as well, they weren't shy of pulling in big names for the entertainment with Stevie Wonder one day and Justin Timberlake. So I think it was the thing I'd never get my head around was like I touched on it before, was the kind of intrusion of just madness and the grid in Monaco, the starting grid in Monaco is a ridiculous spectacle of I'm sort of elbowing Hugh Grant out of the way as I'm sort of trying to walk through there, and these kind of you got these Victoria's Secret models walking away, and you just like going,
terrible.
Whoa. It's terrible. And then I'm going not get for a sympathy.
I feel for you, mate.
But yeah, maybe I should have touched on that. Not getting the money, but in terms of like, is this like elite? We're trying to do elite performance here, and it's just crackers.
What's it like then? If you're when they're kind of prepping to get in the car, and you have got all the celebrities. I know usually when on the BBC when they used to have is it Martin Brundle who would go around and do the grid walk?
Yeah.
But often you'd end up having Naomi Campbell popping in and a few of these random celebs. So for yourself, would you see them trying to want to speak to Max? And would they respect his desire to focus more on the race?
I think if it was kind of a celeb sportsman, they'd sort of be like, yeah, okay. And now look, I'm not gonna get above my station and say, oh yeah, I held back, Daniel Craig or whatever. I said, no, not yet. Now Daniel Max is trying to focus.
You got him in a headlock. That's all right.
I wouldn't really have been at that point. Like if these, and with Red Bull being Red Bull, quite a marketing thing. The camera crews come in there, and Max, and that's an example there of actually Max being comfortable with the flexibility and the fluidity of his thinking and his behaviour. Actually, and some people would be like quite astounded by it. They'd be like, Max just having a laugh and joking, and then but the minute he sits in the car and pulls the visor down, that cold, calculated, risk, kind of leaning into risk and just going, bring it on, and I'm not going to get flummoxed by anything, would be there. But for us sort of mere mortals, we're in the garage like going, what? He's like looking around to get this crazy. Baku, it was like Mariah Carey and her sort of entourage, and it was just like you just get your head around it, and it's mad. So that's always a scene. And the other thing, it happened at a lot of races, but it was always an incredible spectacle, was the kind of flyovers after the national anthem. You got these A380 jumbo jets flying hundreds of meters above these racetracks, and helicopters coming in. And in America, it was like military helicopters, like a scene out of Apocalypse Now or something. And so it's just that whole kind of razzmatazz. And weirdly, by the end, after a few seasons, you're kind of conditioned to going, oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Whereas
other people saw it, it's like, what is going on here?
It sounds like such a crazy world, and I guess for us normal guys, unless you've been around that, you can't really appreciate what it's like. And whilst we're actually, let's say, talk about normal guys, now you've moved on to, as you said, I know, working perhaps with young race drivers.
Yeah.
And if we were talking about the strength and conditioning side of it, or just their performance, how would you, for a guy listening, what kind of simple tips would you give him to start working on his performance? I mean, what would you do when a guy walks through the door?
Well, a young, say, an aspiring racing driver?
Yeah.
Firstly, would just see, I think, and I've sort of done it at the start of this year with some other younger drivers I'm now working with as well. Historically, they don't physically exercise much. I think that has changed a little bit now, and younger drivers, there's kind of driver academies now, so young drivers are sort of starting to take part in knowing that actually there's big advantages to be gained in terms of from their mental performance, concentration and focus, from being superior, more fitter than their rival. One of the first things I kind of do with them is just see what they're like with discomfort, where their tolerance is on a physical discomfort most. Now, and that's not just I'd give them a flogging, but you kind of need to see a little bit like what their threshold is like. Again, and that leads us a big opportunity of having a different conversation. But neck assessments, neck and kind of shoulder assessments, they got to be kind of slim, lean, and strong. So I work with a colleague who has a pretty thorough neck and shoulder assessment with a bit of kit, and just get some base physiology testing done. Would I say it has to be really specific? No, because there isn't yet a specific driver fitness kind of test that's been. It's not like it, and so if your preference was to do a VO2 max test, if your preference was to do some lactate threshold testing, it wouldn't necessarily be wrong. You'll get some good information. So that's firstly what I would do as well, because we need to start making the training, their cardiovascular work specific to them. And once you've got that, you've got a good foundation to take them onto more specific forms of training, such as heat stress. That's a big area actually that drivers become superior in dealing with. Most of the time the races are in warm, hot climates. Singapore, Malaysia, it's 38, 36 degrees, and it's 50, 60 degrees in the cockpit, 70% humidity. Singapore's a 2-hour race. So it's a very unique sort of skill of physical conditioning skill that they have. In terms of a sports science backed, research backed, sort of lots of literature, there isn't much out there. So, but certainly making sure they have superior and very high level cardiovascular work. So you could, would I say take a triathlete's training program, take a cycle endurance program. It's just a lot of training is not sport specific, and that's a word used in a term used in strength and conditioning a lot. Oh yeah, try and make it as sport specific as possible. But the minute you're not doing the sport, it's arguably not sport specific. But in driving, you're even more removed from that. And these guys can't practice their sport either. In Formula One, less so. Some of the drivers I work with now compete in different categories, Porsche Super Cup, things like that, and they have a few more testing days, and your ability to go in a similar type car and have some hours at a racetrack is more possible than say you can't go and take, even drivers, some drivers can, who have contacts and extreme wealth, to hire a racetrack and an old Formula One car for a bit, but these guys can't go and practice their sport. And that's one of the challenges with the role and with the application of sports science and strength and conditioning science in the role, is they can't go and practice their sport. They can't put their boots on and go and take some pot shots at goal or things like that, like rugby kick can do, or a footballer can do, or a cyclist can do. So making their sport, they've got to have very good general fitness, overall fitness. Some specific areas, neck and shoulder and core, definitely. Older racing drivers, retired drivers do suffer with sort of disc problems in their spine because of all the compression and the G-forces, the cumulative G-forces over a career. That is a concern. So as healthy as you can be through your hips and your shoulders and your neck is definitely a strong suit. But the first port of call, someone walks to me is say, well, what's your general conditioning like? What's your sort of base level like? What's your tolerance to discomfort and heat stress? Because that's what you're going to be exposed to. And then you sort of see the tantrums or sulking comes out, and it's fine. But then that's the opportunity there. So yeah, they've got to be really elite generalists. Yeah. Okay. You can say neck and conditioning, and then trying to quantify, which is very difficult, the sort of cognitive capacity. And people say, "Oh, would you do like for mental training?" There are skills-based exercises you can do, hand-eye coordination stuff. Juggling's a great one, and then more coordination-based, reaction-based skills. But reaction training predominantly is genetically predisposed anyway. You can optimize. You can just optimize what you've got. Can you dramatically improve your reactions? No, I don't think so. But you can definitely, with the bandwidth you've got, you can be operating at a poor level or a good level of what you've got.
So much, isn't there? I just think there's so much, I guess, you have to cover. And actually, we had one or two more questions that were more technical. But it might be that we'll ask you those on Instagram, and then we can share them on there. But I was going to ask you then about the reason we kind of are on this call also is because we ended up with you kindly speaking at one of our Whole Man Academy events. And what brought you? No, let's rephrase the question. What brought the Whole Man Academy to your attention? And what was it about it that kind of you thought was was an important part of coming along to speak?
So firstly, it was actually a friend's mother said, "Oh, look, you should check out Whole Man Academy," because she's a yoga instructor and a personal development kind of coach, a little bit on the spiritual side as well. But she said, "Yeah, check out this Whole Man Academy, do really good things." And that's when I first sort of looked you guys up, and seeing the nature of your events, guys getting together, talking about a little bit about male identity, but it was particularly, and you thought there was a slant of kind of career and job performance and aspiration, and I know it's just that I was going through, and I was right in the middle of that time when we made contact, Anthony. I had, like you say, just decided to step away from doing Formula One for a few reasons, but one was actually taking the plunge and going, right, I can sort of do this on my own, and all those kind of feelings that doing this podcast, like, okay, actually, I can do this, and there's definitely, I would like to see if what I've experienced can contribute in another way to the performance outside of a sports result, outside of a race result, outside of a rugby result, outside of a fight, whatever it might be. And that's it. And then I saw your sort of events, and it was I know you guys, the events, every time I'd see them on Instagram, I saw them once going, "Oh yeah, come to this event," and I was like, and then I was like, next one I was like, well, what if I want to start just another thing, and this will taps into some of the questions I know that we've spoken about, but it's like I want to develop myself. I want to see if I can talk to a group of guys, and a nice environment is like a group of guys who are sort of just really understanding that and like-minded. And I think that's the attraction, certainly for your listeners, for your followers, for your subscribers, for the guys that have spoken at your events, is that actually there's value to be seen in all sorts of things. And I hope from the conversation we're having today that there's one or two nuggets that people come away with, and listening to some of your podcasts as well, and the conversation I did with Judge Rinder, I thought was brilliant, and I love listening to him. And it's just these sort of nuggets that can help us all. And at this particular time, it would be good if the frequency, which you're certainly contributing to, is up there. So yeah.
Well, so my next question really was about that. What was it like for you? I mean, we had obviously Judge Rinder there, or Rob, as he's actually got a first name. I was calling Judge Rinder.
I said Judge Rinder, didn't I?
Just call him Judge when you see him. And obviously Charlie King spoke as well. Was from Towie. I spoke to him earlier today, actually, just on the joys of WhatsApp. But what was it like for you sitting in front of the group of we had roughly 25 to 30 guys in that event? And I know I had the joy of interviewing, but what was it like for you sitting up there and answering the questions?
Yeah, it was good, and I don't know, I'm sort of self-critical, but was like to think I'm reflective on anything I do, and I think it was, I suppose I got my answer really by the fact we all went to the pub afterwards and had a drink and talked then about what we'd all just talked about, and that was that kind of sort of confirmed for me, like yeah, it was absolutely fine. And did I maybe waffle on one or two questions and maybe get a bit nervous. Absolutely right, I did.
You do that.
But just there's an engagement there, and there's a curiosity there. And that's the exciting thing, and to talk to that, to talk with that was pleasing. So yeah, I found it a good experience, and I think with Rob there and Charlie as well, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, in some respects there's such a breadth and difference, and then also it's all the same shit. It's all the same sort of shit.
It's a good point you make there, because I think that's the important thing. If you took yourself and Charlie and Rob Rinder, on paper, you're all very different people. One's reality TV, Rob on his daytime TV, and you've got the sports performance. But actually, in that room, all the guys that came along took important, let's call them nuggets, from all three of you.
Yeah.
And actually, having a real mixture of guys in the room, I think, is part of the fun of it, where you might not have ever mixed with those guys and vice versa. So even the guys from the Shake Up, who are the men's cosmetics range, they stayed all day, and we got a chance to talk to them about men's makeup and cosmetics. And it's just what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of growing your network of interesting chaps to speak to. And whilst we talk about guys, I know we asked you a couple of questions beforehand to kind of meditate on, but one of them was, what have you learned from the men in your life? Now, what we find is sometimes people are like, I can't remember what I answered. But I know you said the value of hard work was from your dad. So could you just tell us a little bit about that? Yeah,
absolutely. I think, firstly, it was sort of passed on from my dad, and he's sort of known to my friends. I've got some friends that have never met my dad, and yet they do impersonations of him, because I do impersonations of him. And it's from a comical sense of view, but he's kind of, and as I'm sure we've got a parent who's like, oh yeah, so-and-so's dad's a bit of a, quite funny. Like, but and when I was younger, it was all the things that would wind me up about him, his sort of obsessiveness, and his sort of getting up really early, cleaning all his shoes on a Sunday or whatever it might be, or all these particular things. When you're young and sort of going through teenage years, you're like, God, that's so sad and pathetic, and like, why'd you do that? And then as you get older, you start realizing you're doing exactly the same things. And to later, some of the questions, sort of, what's been a big indicator for your success, whatever. And you kind of go, well, who are these modeled off? And and then with working in sport for over a decade now, motivation, discipline, and particularly in the sports I've worked in, combat sports and rugby, very hard on discipline, and kind of these cookie cutter kind of sayings for sort of taglines of discipline, and discipline equals freedom, and all this sort of stuff. And but it is like, you cannot really, occasionally you can chance it, and some things turn out great with a massive stroke of fortune. And as all the book, I've got a sort of stack of books I'm reading here, and they're all coaching books, and my dad berates me that I should pick up a novel, for God's sake, and I should read something pretty different. But that idea of really that you can't really get much without hard work, and the feeling of fulfillment really is not there when you haven't had to sort of really stretch yourself, when you haven't had to get uncomfortable, and when you've not sort of suffered a little bit. And I've got the word suffer on my website, actually, and I remember when I first put it on there, I was like, should I put the word suffer on there? But I really mean it from a control point of view, and a kind of I'd say functional suffering. But I really think adversity is absolutely essential in some form, and that's different for every people. And I'm not trying to lose perspective here on what really is true adversity in these times in particular, but it really is an essential ingredient. And being able to work through that systematically and work hard and not get bored with the hard work, that's a test of it. And I talk about, and obviously keep referring to sport as it's my large reference point, but I've seen now a breadth of sportsmen and athletes, various different abilities, various different characters, and I think, say the top ones, because all the people I've worked with have had their sort of moment of brilliance and moment of greatness relative to where they are, but they all share an ability to not get not see the repetition, not see the discipline as sort of monotonous,
Okay.
and not see it as the grind. They are comfortable with it. Racing drivers are comfortable with the obsession of, say, sim racing. At the moment, with sport being really virtual, motorsport is actually probably thriving most in a virtual competitive world, because it's actually really taken. But I talked about drivers not being able to practice their craft physically in a virtual world. They do it a lot, and they can do it a lot. It would be the equivalent of going out training for a cyclist on a 6-hour ride, and whilst you go, oh yeah, they're sitting down, they're not, but actually it's completely different. But there's a mental ache and a mental concentration in doing it daily, and so that kind of, that ethic and that understanding of not of enjoying the hard work and finding ways to enjoy the hard work was a value that got instilled for me pretty early. And I think probably circumstantially as well, I was not and I'm not academically gifted, and I always think of the story of when, for my GCSEs, for the year before, my old man would force me to do a GCSE past paper every Saturday morning.
Right.
I'd do it, and I used to hate it. And I used to have
fun.
And I used to have so many tantrums, and I was just like, I hate it because I was rubbish at it. And I did it, and I passed, got my GCSE, but not particularly good grade or anything. And those kind of things at the time was one example. But yeah, it's kind of taught me that you've got to maximize what you've got. And there's good examples in sport, art, music, wherever it is, where you see the not necessarily the most highly naturally gifted individual trumping someone who has got that. Sport is littered with cases like that, and it's, you talk about coaches a bit of a cookie cutter, but they'll always pick work ethic, or I'll pick character over talent any day. And maybe I was from only an academic point of view, I certainly felt, well, I'm certainly not gifted in that point of view, so I've got to go through the sort of suffering. It's not really suffering doing a GC paper every Saturday morning, but at the time it felt like
feels it. Yeah.
Oh god, it actually definitely ticked that box. So yeah, hard work's a big one, and just finding ways to enjoy it. And this time now, actually finding ways to enjoy and be okay with monotony, and just sort of that continuous thing is a really great skill set that I think, whether you're a teacher, coach, leader, trainer, whatever, to come out of this time would be a big one for.
That's a good point. I know in our previous podcast we spoke to a chap called Chevy Ruff, and he spoke about the importance of being okay with solitude.
Yeah,
which was an interesting one, which we've not touched on before. And one of the other questions we asked was about what one personal habit or daily routine has contributed most to your success.
Yeah. I remember answering this one, and I sort of thought, I don't want to just say doing exercise. I thought, obviously, but coming from a personal training point of view, originally playing lots of sports when I was younger, it's hard for me to look beyond that. But the impact it has on your state, and from a coaching point of view, personal development point of view, communication point of view, understanding how it impacts that mental, physical, emotional energy around you, how that can impact your relationships, working and personal. It's hard for me to look beyond a quick win of shifting that physical state. I did it before this podcast because I sort of went out for a walk with my girlfriend this morning, but I sort of did a bit of work this morning, but I wasn't quite feeling energized and wasn't quite feeling sharp and wanting to contribute positively to this discussion. And it's like, okay, go and change state. I was like, I really can't be asked. I was like, I know it's going to impact me in a way that is just sort of unfounded, and so that's so it's hard for me to look beyond physical exercise, any form of it, and from whether it's the people starting moving, getting off the sofa with some Joe Wicks, or the sort of elite athlete, everything in between, whether it's a walk in the morning for 10 minutes, it's hard to look beyond that. I think being aware of your physical state, emotional and mental state, and what impacts it is a quick win. If you can understand that, and understanding that all communication is state based. So for me, it's physical exercise I know impacts my state in a big way. My coach I work with called me a state junkie, but I'm so sort of like my mood and emotion and inner chatter is largely dictated by my state, and I get quick wins and momentum from exercise. So for me, it's hard to look beyond where it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hour's slog, or whatever it is.
Well, it's important because I think there's 2 points here. One was that one of the events we had, which was quite early on in the Whole Man Academy, we had a group of guys who were either involved with yoga or fitness and TRX experts, etc. Yeah. And we spoke a lot about the importance of physical exercise. And I appreciate that one or two of the guys that spoke to us after said, you know what, I find it hard to listen to because I don't like doing gym and sports. And our point was, and you just said, it's not necessarily saying you need to be doing weights or running, but you say, is it just going for a walk, or is it, I don't know, it might sound odd, but literally putting on a track that you like music, and jumping out of the room to it. It's just doing something that gets the blood pumping and gets the body moving. Yeah,
and it can be listening to a piece of emotive music. And the question I'd sort of, and rightly so, and it's just that I didn't want to kind of say, oh, I'm a personal trainer, S&C coach, so yeah, it'd be like doing some bench press before I have my cornflakes or whatever. Yeah. But the question I'd sort of ask back to that individual would be, well, what's the consequence of, can you do nothing? And what's the consequence of doing nothing? And whilst that is a fair, valid point, it's like the thought of doing exercise, the thought of doing that, everyone's bloody jogging now, or everyone's on Strava. But what is the consequence of doing nothing? Is doing nothing an option? And then you'd open up into hopefully another form of conversation where you actually go, and that's a strategy, and it's a strategy that he's running. And you can dig a bit deeper into his point of going, I hate it, or I can't do that. The thought of it, and actually the language that he uses there actually is your realization that, well, hang on a minute, there's a big opportunity for him there, because he's just saying the thought of it. So we just need to look at, is it actually doing it? Do you realize the impact of doing it? Do you realize the impact of not doing it? And is it actually is it a thinking thing or a feeling thing? How does he know that to be true in his experience, or just his thinking? And I think that's the big difference. And I would see that in sports. I've dealt with sort of, a non-compliant athlete or a sort of rebellious athlete. Definitely put Max in that category, and that's why he's great, and that's why he is who he is. Brilliant. And one of the ways I would, and I've had it in rugby and other individuals, and they say to me, oh, I don't like that, or I'll never do this because I don't want to do it, or this doesn't work, or I don't know, all this sort of resistance. And again, resistance is good. It means I can look at my own communication, because if I'm getting resistance, probably my communication's not right. But that thing of going, I know I don't like this, probably they're not always, but there's a good chance they're creating a good story for themselves, and creating this thinking that is stopping them doing it for a reason, with a positive intention behind it, that stops them from doing it. But it's less likely that it's an actual real thing stopping them from doing it.
I think you said it's the thinking that's usually the thing that's stopping them.
Yeah.
And that leads us on to the other question, and the last question was, what one piece of advice would you give to a man so he can do life better?
Yeah. I thought about, and I really like these questions that came through, because they sort of, Whole Man Academy is starting these podcasts, and you're learning these podcasts, and I thought this is cool. This is like a sort of Tim Ferriss type thing, and I was like, okay. And I've enjoyed listening to answers that people are kind of like, not this grand philosophical thing, but maybe try and lean into that a little bit. And I'd try and answer in two ways. One, if we're staying down the physical way, leaving your states, I think I answered, do more press ups.
Yep.
And I sort of have various other coaches I follow and physical trainers I follow, and there's even a study on life expectancy and press ups and things like that. But I'm probably understanding the way those studies are done. It's people who do more press ups tend to probably look after themselves a little bit better. So do more press ups, really, really simple military based exercise, but core, lower back. You're going to look better with your top off. There's a touch of vanity there, which I think we can all speak to. It's not a bad thing. So do more press ups. great way to charge your morning and change your state straight away.
Yeah, don't need any exercise, don't need any space.
Definitely not. If you can't do them full, you can do 3 knees, but you can start. And if you thought of it as hard, you can do 5 press-ups every morning. You can do 10 press-ups every morning. Absolutely, you can before you get in the shower. I was doing this and I was thinking, can I put that? That's not so grand for example, but I've been doing it. I always say I'll try and do it every morning. Since the lockdown, I've been doing it more consistently, probably 5, 6 days a week doing press-ups in the morning. And I'm just like, yes, and that's the thing. And don't miss twice. One morning I won't do it, and that's fine. I think it's James Clear, there's psychologist and behavioural psychologist who was this book actually. Was it called Behave? No, it wasn't called Behave. Habits, Atomic Habits is a great book. He's like, look, whatever you do, life's going to get in the way sometimes, but just really try not to miss twice. So on your calendar, if you're in this time that we're in now and you're like, yeah, okay, I've been trying to do these better habits or good habits, actually mark them down. We don't do that enough. For anything as little as making the bed or tidying the room before we go out or doing press ups or going for a walk. Actually tick it off and visually see it every time you do it. And then when you start to see, I missed one morning, that's also no need to go mental and think that's a disaster. Just try
not beat yourself up.
Yeah, just try not to do it twice in a row. If you go twice in a row, that's when it's then just far easier to miss it 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row and then you're not doing it. So don't miss twice and do more press ups. And the other one, which was probably a bit more behavioural and a bit more coachy, and just speaking of my own experience and understanding my sort of personality a bit more, was my area for sort of growth and development is challenging what I sort of not being as agreeable, not being as not saying no a bit more.
Yeah.
But the opportunity now is, I think I put my answer in, was a way of sort of micro practice, little opportunities to work against an instinctive resistance. So it's the classic thing of, and now we're in households with our families, with sort of other people's families, that we're in really good little opportunities to micro practice, sort of rocking the boat, and then dealing with whatever comes about of it. I think it's sort of there's a in talk about sort of anxiety and inner chatter and thinking worst case scenario. We tend to sort of do that, but actually trusting yourself and going, look, I'll rock the boat temporarily because I'm going to be it's not being selfish, but it is just being true for you in a moment. And they often happen in discussions, or it doesn't have to be conflict, but conflicts, things arise. Say what you want to say and be direct with it, and then deal with the consequences. You're adult. You can trust yourself to navigate a conversation well. I think from a work point of view, whether in business, from a relationship point of view, in coaching, I spoke about, probably summarising my role was in Formula One, was having better conversations. Yeah. Not a real glamorous like blockbuster tagline, but in a way that kind of was it. So that's going to help your relationships, tenfold if you can have better conversations. And the way we are, but often those better conversations come from the things we instinctively don't want to say in the moment. Really nice time now with lockdown, with parents, girlfriends, brothers, sisters, family, politics. Just test the waters in small levels. I'm not saying go for a social hand grenade in the dining room table tonight, but just have some frank discussions. Say something quite direct and blunt, and then that's the more you move into that resistance and lean into that resistance, that's your areas for growth, and sacrificing short-term peace of mind for the real relationships that you want to have.
I guess
that's the way to summarize my point there, and probably from the long answer to it. How to do better in life, be okay with sacrificing short-term peace of mind for the relationships you really want to have, and do more press-ups.
Well, that's the thing you said about practice being disliked, and I guess in a way it's a bit of getting out of your comfort zone. And even for us doing the podcast, we're going to speak to a huge range of people, and you're probably, when people listen to it, going to hear suggestions or things maybe they don't like, but realizing that's it's okay being going against the grain of what other people think, as long as you kind of believe in what you're talking about. I think we're going to see that a lot. And again, I guess I should acknowledge you, because for all the people that come on the podcast, we know that being on social media or on the airwaves in any way, shape or form leaves you open to usually people challenging you about your knowledge. It's not often we find that people come on and say, what a great job you've done. They'll come on to tell you what you got wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's been good to hear, and especially also just to understand that world of Formula One, because for all of us, and even if you watch it on TV, you can't understand what the circus is like when you're in the belly of it.
Yeah, no, it is. It is as I'd often described it as a circus. It's great, and I love my time there. I was very, very lucky to be with the driver I was with and with the team I was with, and it's complete bonkers. And yet in there is definitely I think there's everything. There's not as what it seems on the TV. There's real high performance and cutting edge there, alongside just absolute sort of madness. Because I think and sometimes you're thinking, what is that Formula One, or is this just craziness? Because they've got to accommodate just so much, and so much can sometimes get clouded. But no, it's been the learning ground. And I didn't certainly know my first year. He talks about that first year, how to deal with it. At the time I was like, oh no, what have I done? I think maybe I should sort of go back to what I know a bit more. Little to know, it set me on a path to be actually getting into this form of my career now that I want to get into, and actually opening up my eyes a bit more as to what it could do for me, and what I could learn from it. So, yeah.
And what's next for you, Jake?
What is next for me? Next for me is, I've sort of, as I said, and you in your very kind introduction, you kind of said at the moment I have this coaching company that is, my recent learning references motorsport, and it's a very unique niche, and I'm very grateful that I've worked in that niche and have a moderate degree of understanding of that role now, and the competitors that exist within it. So working with motorsport performance and young drivers, and offering performance packages for drivers individually or teams individually. Just recently did a great. I've started working with GP Elite, who are a Dutch race team. Nevertheless, obviously realised I was reasonably well seen, I suppose, in the Netherlands. So they're a great bunch of guys competing in the Porsche Super Cup and Carrera Cup, and working with 6 young drivers there, which is great. And then for me, the other kind of intention of the business is to do personal development coaching and sort of personal self-development for teams and individuals. I'm in the process of upskilling myself more there. I am interested and have been on the receiving end of coaching, grounded largely in sort of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, the understanding of the relationship between the body and linguistic language, and how that can have an impact in having better conversations and developing myself. So that's the big area for me at the moment, and it's a new area for me in terms of working with business people, corporates, understanding that language and mindset a little bit. But as I sort of grow and know a little bit more about myself in terms of how to get the most out of racing drivers and crossing over in other sports, is it how different is that going to be in a corporate setting, or in another setting in performing arts? I sort of want to chuck myself into more. So that's next to me at the moment, and then it's seeing whether I need to hopefully not postpone a wedding, getting married in September, which would be very cool.
Whereabouts?
Well, Norfolk, hopefully. We'll see. So they're big things. It's the career development and just
fantastic,
good personal stuff on the side.
Well, last question I was trying to remember to ask is, how can people get hold of you, or we'll put your details in the show notes, but if people want to get hold of you, what's the best way?
Probably a email on my website. I have a contact page on my website, really easy to find. That is I'll do 3 W's there.
Let's put one in. Yeah, go on.
www.forceandgrace.com. That is Force and Grace. That's the name of the company I went with. At first, I had sort of my name as a coaching company, but I wanted to maybe have something a little bit different, and it spoke to me. And it's a little bit, I suppose, there's a philosophy behind it, but it's a little bit how we learn and have to go through sort of learning and performance and life a bit, really. You need to apply a bit of force, a bit of grunt at times, and we all want to get to a point where we're carrying off a skill, carrying off a process, and feeling and understanding a little bit more grace, gracefulness, gracious movement, but grace in sort of mind and appreciation and gratitude. So that's kind of where the name came from, Force and Grace. I'm at Instagram as well, at Jake Force and Grace, at Jake_Force and Grace, sorry. But my website's probably best bet, a bit of more background information and a contact email there.
Lovely stuff. Well, we're always on Instagram, so we'll be tagging you on the post, and when we publish the pod, we'll send you the link. So just to say thank you once again, because at least we've already spent a whole day with you on one of our live events, but thanks for spending another hour and a half with us on our pod. And hopefully when the world goes back to whatever normal was, we'll see you at another event very soon.
Sounds awesome. And thanks very much, and thanks for the invites. It's been a privilege to talk.
Super. Thanks, Jake.